Once upon a time, video game manufacturers packed games in with their consoles at launch and afterwards, both as a way to showcase the system's abilities and as a way to drive adoption. This practice has fallen by the wayside in recent years, but why? We'll be discussing that and more on Downloadable Content. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Downloadable Content. I'm Ronny, and with me we have Brian.
Heyo!
And we have Ron.
Hey, everyone.
And today we're going to be talking about the history and importance of pack-in or bundled video games. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that every single episode of Downloadable Content can be found on the website dlcpodcast.com. Episodes can also be found on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, and Google Play Music. Also, you can view upcoming episodes on the website. Check them out. Let us know if you'd like to be in on an episode or give us ideas for future episodes. We'd love to get them. Now, pack-in games have had a history stretching back to the 70s, being used to drive the adoption of many of the most popular consoles in history. Indeed, several pack-in games are among the best-selling games of all time. What was the role they played in the growth of the video game industry, and why has that importance waned? That and our personal experiences with pack-in games will be our discussion topic for the day. So, guys, what was your first pack-in game?
I'll start with this one. The first one that I remember vividly, because I do not. I did own an NES as a kid, but I don't remember the day I got it. But I remember the day I got the original Game Boy. That memory is burned into my brain because 5-year-old me, it was like the happiest day of my life.
Did it come with the Tetris pack-in or the Super Mario pack-in?
It came with 2 games.
Okay.
It came with Tetris, and it came with a game called Bases Loaded.
Yep.
And I remember just the hours and hours of enjoyment I got out of both those games, and the hours of enjoyment that my mother got out of Tetris when she'd surreptitiously steal the Game Boy from me whenever I'd go off to kindergarten or first grade or what have you.
Well, Tetris is probably one of the most important pack-ins they ever did. It appealed to every demographic. It brought young girls into games that didn't think games were for them. It brought older adults into games. Tetris was probably one of the best choices for a pack-in title ever.
I know for me, in terms of my household, we had bought the Game Boy for my dad initially, but almost immediately it sort of immediately went to both myself and my mother. I went to it because it was a way for me to long car rides was the main goal behind it being used.
Yeah,
and it wasn't because I was like a loud child or anything like that. It was just more so something to keep me occupied while the adults went off to do while we were driving around or what have you.
We all used the Game Boy for that, and that screen was so bad in the car a lot of the time when you don't have the best of light.
Yeah. And then my mom used it because she got into Tetris real bad. She became like a Tetris fiend, pretty much.
As I said, Tetris, like that and Wii Sports much later are probably the two pack-in titles with the widest demographic of people that it drew in.
Yeah, and between those consoles, every other console that almost every other console that I received in between the Game Boy and the Wii, were bought for me, or they were hand-me-downs. So,
yeah. But for me, my first pack-in was or bundle more specifically, and I'll mention the difference before we go on, but was the NES Action Set, which was the Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt double pack.
Yeah, that was mine.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Ron. I thought you were saying the Game Boy was yours too. That's why I went on.
No. So the Game Boy was one I remember, but I also know that I did have a Nintendo at the time. Again, this is one of those consoles that my parents had bought initially for themselves to enjoy, because my dad did enjoy playing on the Atari and in the arcades at the time, as an older adult sort of thing. But it quickly became like the console for like the kids to play.
Like I had game systems before the NES. We didn't have a lot of money, but we live on Cape Cod, which is a relatively rich area, and we went to the pick of the litter at the dump, and people would drop off old systems they didn't want. So, like before the NES, I had a Commodore and an Atari, but neither of those did I pick up, so I didn't necessarily have the pack-ins for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll go. We actually the first pack-in anybody knows was in 1972. Table tennis on the Magnavox Odyssey, which is actually what Pong was based on, because that table tennis game predated Pong.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were the creators of Pong were sued over it.
Oops.
Yep. Pong was definitely a better game than Magnavox Odyssey's table tennis. But yeah, and then the other pre-NES one that's worth bringing up was the Atari 2600 with Combat. Because if you've ever gone to any kind of swap meet, you've probably seen enough copies of Combat that you could build a house. They were everywhere. I mean, it's probably... I think Combat... unlike some of these ones, I don't have this in my notes, but I think Combat might be the longest running pack-in title of all time, because they packed in Combat for over a decade.
Nice.
With the Atari 2600.
Wow.
Yeah. So, we're going to be talking about both pack-in games and bundles here. And those aren't synonyms. There is a difference between the two, but it's not a hard definition. Generally, if a system can't be sold, it was not sold initially without the game, that is definitely a pack-in title. If you only have the system sold with one pack-in, but you can also buy it regularly, that's probably a pack-in as well. Once you get into, we have 8 different versions of a system, each of them with different games, or when the game comes with it but isn't actually in the box, those are bundles. And bundles are more what we see in the modern era, and we'll get to why that is. So, how would you guys like to continue with this? You guys, I have a list of some pack-ins I want to talk about. We can go in chronological order, or we can just all throw out like memorable pack-ins that we remember from our past.
We could do that. I was also thinking that it might be worth discussing like maybe why they were chosen.
Oh, absolutely.
For example, I feel like so assuming we go with Nintendo first, yeah, I would guess. It feels like a good starting point, because I'm sure video games have been around for at least 10 years before the NES came out, but it's probably the one that had the biggest.
Oh, absolutely! It had a very big impact. I think one thing to point out. I think launch pack-ins are probably the most important because those are the ones where you're really trying to showcase the system. You're trying to drive adoption.
Mm-hmm.
Not that later ones can't be. Like the action set, the Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt is probably the most memorable of the NES's pack-ins, even though it was the third pack-in that the NES had.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's start back in the NES then. The first pack-in, which none of us had, I would assume, was Duck Hunt and Gyromite because it was only done in test markets. So unless you were in New York for a 6-month period, New York and LA, was that the other one? I don't know. But you would not have gotten that. But it was technically the original pack-in for it. But the pack-in everyone remembers was Super Mario Bros. Arguably one of the most important games of all time for bringing back games.
I feel like it's worth mentioning that, like, Duck Hunt's not a bad game. It's a simple game.
They were trying to make the NES feel like a toy, and definitely having like the toy gun that you got to fire at the screen. Like they were trying to make it feel less video gamey.
Yeah, and there's also the keep. I don't know about you, but my Nintendo ray gun was a gray and orange, brightly colored a dongle thing that you just like. It looked like a gun. It looked like a ray gun out of Roy Rogers.
I don't know. Yeah, exactly. I don't remember whether mine was before or after yours, but I had the light gray, dark gray model. I didn't have the orange model.
Yeah, I had the same one, Ronnie.
Yeah, I don't remember whether that was pre or post the orange. I forget which came first.
I want to say the orange probably came later.
I would think so too. But I know I had the action set, and it came in the action set, and that was 88, so I'm wondering if the orange one was before that. But who knows? I could be completely wrong there. But yeah. I mean, Duck Hunt and Gyromite, they definitely chose that, because both of those are non-traditional games.
Mm-hmm.
To try to make it appear like a toy, because like it also, along with Gyromite, it came with Rob the Robot. Make it look more like a toy. But then we move on to Super Mario Bros, which just was such a strong title to bring back gaming, because it was something you couldn't have done on the Atari or any of the other systems around that period.
Yeah, well, it was a thing too that, from a visual perspective, anything you saw in an arcade, which at the time would have probably been like the most widely played thing and had the quote-unquote most advanced graphics,
mm-hmm.
it looked like a game that came out of an arcade, which was a deliberate design choice, I feel. So
yeah. I mean, they took a lot of the graphical inspiration from the original Mario Bros. Arcade game, so I think that was deliberate.
Yeah.
Bringing the arcade to your
living room.
Yeah, I was gonna say living room. I was about to say bedroom, but then I realized a lot of people don't have their video games set up in their bedroom like I do. But yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody would argue the importance of Super Mario Bros. As a major pack-in title and a driver of the NES's adoption. I don't think the NES would have been anywhere near as successful if Mario Bros. Was not a release title.
And you're probably right.
Yeah. I don't know if the NES would have caught on the way it did. Even if you just pushed Super Mario Bros. Just a couple of years out, I don't know if the NES would have seen the success that it did.
No, I mean, and this, the NES was the first major console right after the video game crash, so Nintendo needed to start strong. They needed something to say, hey, We're not like those. We're not like those.
We're not like those bungling idiots that killed their own economy literally with overproduction and overflooding with a market that can't support it. We're gonna show you what video gaming is really about by having immigrant Italian Americans stomping on Goomba heads and eating mushrooms, deposing
kings,
deposing king lizards, and rescuing princesses.
It was a very weird game when you really get down to it. But I mean, a huge part of the success of Mario Bros. and Zelda were the two big things that drove a lot of the NES. And Mario Bros. Nintendo. One thing we will see going forward on this list of pack-in games is Nintendo makes very good decisions with their pack-in games when they do them.
Yes.
The next one in order would be the Game Boy, which we already touched on. It had a couple different pack-in games, but the initial pack-in was Tetris, which, as I would argue, is the best pack-in. As I said, it appealed to so many demographics. It got people playing the Game Boy that would never have played games before. It brought a lot of people into video games. It made video games a much broader hobby.
And that is something you'll notice with Nintendo particularly, is that a lot of their choices for pack-in or bundled games were games that were meant to appeal to as wide an audience as possible. And you see that, okay, you had obviously Super Mario Brothers, which took off like wildfire. That was a platformer. Tetris is a puzzle game.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. That was the first puzzle game pack-in, and it showed how effective it could be.
I feel like it's also worth pointing out too that they have also chosen titles that, besides appealing to a wide audience, also have a very large amount of replayability based on difficulty and skill level of the time.
Yeah, I think the best pack-ins do have that. I mean, Super Mario Bros. You could say because of the score. I feel like Super Mario Bros. Doesn't have the replayability of Tetris, but that's just me. I prefer the later games.
I should say when I say replayability, what I mean is, as someone coming in brand new to this video game, even when I am going through trying to like piece together how this is operating as baby Ron at like literally like 4 years old, and I'm trying to figure out how, A, what the buttons do, B, how the game's functioning, and then C, what happens when I like start to like get through the levels and stuff like that. As I'm learning and doing all this, I'm enjoying myself. Eventually I do die, but I can then take that knowledge I had gained and then replay it again and try to get farther, and either get more stages done or beat my highest score because there was a scoring system in there at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a thing that the scoring system is a subtle thing, but it is a thing that makes you think I can do better. And was I feel like an unknown but a good decision on the Nintendo's part to give you, the player, a sense of, yes, I think I know how to do this stuff, but I can do it better because the game is keeping track of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm not saying that Nintendo doesn't have that Super Mario Bros. Doesn't have good music or not. It does. I'm just saying that how that game is designed, you can write papers on.
It's a great. I mean, it is a great game for beginning gamers. It does an amazing job of teaching through play. Like there's a reason that if you're learning game design, that the first level of Mario Bros is always going to be something you pick apart, because you can learn so much from just that one stage, not even counting the rest of the game.
Yeah.
After this, we go to two not as stellar pack-in games with the Sega Genesis and TurboGrafx. So the TurboGrafx 16 had its launch pack-in as Keith Courage in Alpha Zones. Have either of you two played that game?
I've never even heard of this game.
It's awful.
Then again,
And-
I kind of gave the TurboGrafx 16 a miss.
Well, the TurboGrafx 16 was originally set up like it had a really good chance of basically becoming the Sega to Nintendo. And then it with its advertising, what they were doing, like they were pushing so much stuff. And Keith Courage in Alpha Zones, which I will argue is the worst pack-in choice of all time, because it is hard to argue that game wasn't one of the things that killed that system, that stopped it from reaching the levels it probably should have.
It's probably worth mentioning to the audience what the game was about in terms of like the genre it was, because I have never heard of this fucking game, and I am like trying to figure out like what the fuck does this game sound like it does based on just the title of the game.
Keith Courage in Alpha Zones is basically a Mario-ish platformer. It doesn't look good, its music is terrible, it controls terrible. Like, there are good things about it. It has some big boss enemies that very, very different than just having Bowser at the end. Like, you have boss enemies that are 4 or 5 times your size. You have some it has a sci-fi aesthetic as opposed to a lot of the stuff like Mario, where yes, it's very original, but it is a fantasy aesthetic, you could argue. So Keith Courage was in some ways the polar opposite of Mario, but it's just a platformer and it's not good. It is miserable to play.
So it sounds like from your description, it sounded like TurboGrafx 16 went, oh, Nintendo was successful with its launch platformer. Let's do that, but worse.
That's exactly right. And TurboGrafx 16 has games that it could have done as its pack-in that would have been much better. The system became very well known for having vertical shooters. They could have done one of those as a pack-in. TurboGrafx 16 is the original home of Splatterhouse. They could have done that, and they would have they could have tried to push the more mature demographic. Like, there were things that they did that kind of brought the TurboGrafx 16 back later, but it was never going to reach the heights that it lost at the beginning. And Keith Courage was definitely part of that. Hitching its wagon to the wrong horse. Right alongside that, we have the Sega Genesis launching with Altered Beast as its pack-in.
Which I
Was
did
that
not...
the only one for the Genesis, or no?
In 2 years later, they released Sonic the Hedgehog as a pack-in, and they set up a mail-in campaign where you can mail in your copies of Altered Beast to get a copy of Sonic the Hedgehog, because so many people were unhappy with Altered Beast.
Yeah, and having played Altered Beast, it's a clunky game, even by standards at the time. It is not a smooth game.
It's a clunky game. I have a lot of fondness for Altered Beast. I played it a lot when I was younger, but clunky is definitely a word I would use to describe it.
No, I actually didn't.
You were saying, Ron?
Oh.
I was gonna say that is. So correct me if I'm wrong. Altered Beast is the beginning scene is like literally like rise from your grave as some guy like comes out of his grave and.
Yep.
Okay, I remember seeing this with a neighbor's Genesis because he had Genesis first. And I could tell that it looked better than the NES at the time, but even while watching it, I knew that there was something a little awkward about it. In like my 6-year-old brain was like, "There's something about this that looks it's better looking, but it doesn't feel as responsive as most of the other Nintendo games."
But part of what they were trying to do with Altered Beast, I'll defend it a little bit, is they wanted, like, if you just play the game when you're transformed into the Werebeast, when you're the werewolf or the golden werewolf or the were-dragon, like, that's the whole point of Altered Beast, is you get power-ups and then you transform. And when you transform, it feels good. Or at least it feels better. It feels like a game. But the whole thing was they wanted to make it feel like you were powering up. So when you're playing the human, it feels clunky and crappy. And then each power-up you get, where you get more buff and muscly, it starts to feel a little better, and then you transform, and that's really what the game is. Really, the game should have just been you playing in that altered form, and they should have just eliminated the whole human bullshit part at the beginning. Just have you transform at the beginning of the stage, and the game would have been viewed a lot better.
Yeah, fair enough. Because I did have a Genesis relatively later on in its life, and my bundle game with it was Sonic. So
yeah, the Altered Beast was with the release in '89, and then they switched to Sonic in 1991 and added in the mail-in. So even if you bought a Genesis with Altered Beast, then you could still mail it in and get Sonic.
Sounds fine, but like, I know Sega at the time was trying to compete with Nintendo, and it wasn't until Sonic that came out that they felt like they had a title that you could finally. They felt that they found something like finally here's a title that we can feel proud of having. That's only going to be on our console, and they started doing. Then they started the Genesis stuff with Nintendo and all that crap.
Well, it's well, this was definitely a launch. It's kind of the predecessor to the modern practice of waiting until you have a massively successful title and then turning it into a bundle, which is what we see in modern consoles, rather than starting with one. But yeah, I can defend it as much as I want, but it's hard to argue that Altered Beast was a success when they had to set up a mail-in to get the better game.
Yeah.
Like, that's not good. Especially with how expensive cartridges are, that they were willing to basically eat those copies of Altered Beast.
Not just the copies, but also not just the copies of the the copies of the cartridges, but also the shipping costs, because shipping costs at the time will be a lot different than today.
Yeah. But in the same year that the Sega Genesis launched Sonic the Hedgehog for its second pack-in, we get the second coming of Nintendo with Super Mario World as the Super Nintendo's initial pack-in.
Yep, and then just looked at Sega and laughed in their face, basically.
Exactly. Super Mario World, like, I don't know, everybody has their own opinion, but out of the classic Mario games, it is probably the best, at least in my opinion.
Super Mario World is my personal favorite Mario title of all time. It is one of those games that I am still playing 30 years later because I love it so much. So, yes.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be my favorite. I'd have to think about that because there's a lot of good ones. But out of Mario 1, 2, 3, and Super Mario World, what was out at the time, Mario World was definitely the best for me. I know some people prefer 3, and I will not argue with that.
No.
A lot of that is aesthetic, on which you prefer. But, I don't think any of us can argue the success of Super Mario World. It absolutely drove the adoption for the Super Nintendo. Like, you couldn't see Super Mario World on a TV and compare it to Mario 1 or even Mario 3 and not immediately see the visual difference there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was I mean, what were your first your first opinions when you laid eyes on Super Mario World?
Gimme.
I if I am recalling correctly, the very first game I saw on the Super Nintendo was not Super Mario World.
What was the first one you saw? Pilot Wings?
Final Fantasy IV.
Okay. Not a bad choice. I mean, it's still certainly an upgrade over Final Fantasy 1.
Yes, it is. So for clarification, I was at my cousin's house for I believe it was a summer party of some kind for one of their birthdays. And my, at the time, 6-year-old self, I think, when I first saw Super Nintendo, was, 93. Yeah, like roughly 93. Let me double make sure my dating is right.
Yep.
Yeah, like 90. Yeah, so it would have been 93. I feel when I first saw this. I was watching my cousins playing this quote unquote adult game in the basement with weirdly colored sprites on a screen. And I did not, at the time, I knew like, hey, they were also people who played on the Nintendo and stuff like that. So that was like what we kind of like talked about pretty much, because most of my cousins are at least 10 years older than I, and like we didn't have much of a generational bridging talking points between the two of us at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And besides, there's 16-year-olds who wants to talk to a 5-year-old, basically.
Yeah.
But the one thing we all kind of agreed on was video gaming, and they let me like sit and watch as long as I didn't make too much noise or try to like play the game, because they're trying to play the game. So they let me sit and watch the arguably one of the most pivotal scenes of Final Fantasy IV, where Cecil is climbing mounts.
Mount
of Ordeals, and then goes from Dark Knight to Paladin.
Yeah.
And then all this is all going on, it was like, what in the heck is going on? This does not look neat. This looks even better than anything.
Is this where your love of Final Fantasy came from?
No. That's 6. That was 6.
Okay.
That was my first time seeing a Final Fantasy game, period. But my first time playing one was getting 6.
Yeah. For Final Fantasy IV is where my love for the series came from. It is not the best of them in my opinion, but it, without a doubt, it is where my love for the series came from.
Yeah. And the I believe that year, that Christmas, I did get a Super Nintendo for Christmas from Santa.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was when I first saw Super Mario World, and that was when that. So I think Christmas Day, 1991 would have been the first time I played Super Mario World.
Now, one thing, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this a little out of order, but I'll mention this since we're on Super Nintendo. Some people 3 years later were lucky enough to get the Toys R Us exclusive pack in Super Mario All-Stars Plus World. that had the original 3 NES Mario games and World all on one cartridge.
Was that not viable?
That was a Toys R Us exclusive. I don't know if it was
Okay.
a pack-in. I don't know if Toys R Us also sold it separately, but I know the game was exclusive to Toys R Us.
Okay,
Period.
so the reason why I'm asking is because I know I have that cartridge. Like I
Okay.
I could literally go into my I could go pull out my box of SNES games and look at that cartridge right now.
Yes. I'm saying, when I say Toys R Us exclusive, they may have been able to sell it separately as well, but it was their exclusive pack-in. Only they sold it that way.
Was this the first time that a major console maker entered into like an exclusive arrangement with a specific department store?
No, that's probably
no.
like Atari and Kohl's or something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, actually, I didn't call it out. So Atari had the Combat as its cartridge, is its cartridge of choice for pack-in for a decade. But the Atari 2600 did have other pack-in titles that were exclusives to certain department stores.
I was just wondering. So there you go.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Super Mario All-Stars Plus World, that is a very, very solid pack-in there.
Yes.
Oh yes. I got that bundle. I was like, Super Mario All Stars. Like, oh, it's a bunch of Super Mario games, right? And I'm like, yeah, it is. And I look at the back packaging, and it's like, what's Super Mario 2? What's Super Mario Lost Worlds? I was like, my 7-year-old brain was like, I am so confused, but it's 5 Mario games or something like that.
It's 5 Mario games. One Lost Worlds, 2, 3, and World. Like, those are some of the best, arguably some of the best games of all time. Like, holy crap, like, get 5 of them all at once? Yes, please.
Yeah.
But yeah, jumping, I didn't know about this until I was an adult, that they had the All-Stars Plus World Pack. I had All-Stars itself.
Maybe it's also maybe it's just All Stars I'm thinking of. It's been so long since I last looked at my catalog of Super Mario or Super Nintendo games. It might just be straight up All Stars I'm thinking of.
It might be All Stars you're thinking of, because some of this was hard for me to verify, but I only saw All Stars Plus World listed as a pack-in title for Toys R Us. So. But it's hard to tell. Like, some of this stuff, unless you were there at the time, which, as I said, I didn't. I was in games at this point. I didn't know that was a thing until several years ago when I first saw a copy of it. But yeah, I mean, All Stars is such a solid title, and combining that with World, you have one of the most generous pack-ins of all time. The most generous is what we're coming into right now. We're jumping back 2 years to right after the NES, when the Turbo Duo launched. Do you guys know what the Turbo Duo is?
No.
Okay, you remember the Turbo Graphics?
Yeah.
Just talked about it? Okay.
Yeah.
The Turbo Graphics also had a Turbo CD, which was its CD add-on. Neither the Turbo Graphics or the CD add-on did particularly well. Then they created the Turbo Duo, which combined the two of them into one thing. And they went, we are going to make this work. We are going to make this popular. And they went all out. The Turbo Duo, this is what it came packed in with. Bonk's Adventure, Bonk's Revenge. Both of those, for those who don't know, are platformers where you play a big-headed caveman who hits things with his head, hence the name Bonk. They are very good titles. Gate of Thunder, which is a very, very well-done vertical shooter. Bomberman. All of those are combined on one CD. Then it came with Ys Books 1 and 2, which were the signature RPGs of the TurboGrafx. And a $50 coupon so you can choose a game. and Dungeon Explorer, which was a new game, which later on Dungeon Explorer was instead replaced with a mystery game out of like 15 of the best-selling games on the console.
Okay, that's a lot of video games.
And all of them are some of the best games that were on the system.
The question I have is, were there any games left on the system?
Yes, there were. Here's the thing. The TurboGrafx and Turbo CD actually had some excellent titles. Like I said, it's one of the best systems if you're a fan of vertical or horizontal shooters like Life Force or Gradius. They had several unique Gradius titles on it. It had the best pinball titles for a decade for people who are a fan of pinball. Had some of the best stuff there. It had better console ports of several of the arcade games. Like its version of Splatterhouse was better. It's the reason why I go. Keith Courage screwed that system hard, because if they had chosen one of their stronger titles as a pack-in game, I think we would be talking about TurboGrafx. I think we would have had a 3-part console war like we have now, rather than just between NES and Genesis, or Nintendo and Sega. Like TurboGrafx had a very strong lineup. It just needed to get more third-party people, and it didn't get it because it didn't get the adoption it needed at the beginning. Also, Nintendo holding third parties hostage, which, you know, we've talked about in other systems, in other podcasts. But I think it's hard to argue that is the most generous pack-in of all time.
Oh yeah. Here, have everything.
That's 7 of their best games and a coupon to get a game of your choice, basically. Because their games were $50 and you got a $50 coupon.
That not only is it sounds like this is the We're Sorry pack-in bundle.
Absolutely. And it was them trying to get the market share back, and the Turbo Duo did better than the CD did, but it never reached the heights that system probably should have reached.
Yeah.
Just
want to let you know on your time, you're almost at 45 minutes.
Do we? I'm about halfway through my list of packing games. We have other stuff to talk about as well, but if you want, we can take a break here.
You decide where you want to end it.
We will break here at the end of the 16-bit era, and when we come back, we're going to come back talking about the Sega Saturn, the Super Nintendo, and beyond later on Downloadable Content. and welcome back to Downloadable Content. When we left off, we had talked about the pack-in games from the early days of the Odyssey all the way up to the 16-bit era and the Super Nintendo. And now we are going to be moving on into 32-bit systems and beyond into the modern era. So I think a great way to start here will be something that was revolutionary at the time, Virtua Fighter as the pack-in for the Sega Saturn. I don't know if either of you two had any experience there, but I remember Virtua Fighter blowing people's minds at the time.
I did not own a Saturn, so I did not get introduced to Virtua Fighter until much later.
I know Virtua Fighter. I have not played any of it. I just know that people were. It was a similar philosophy of it with a lot of 32-bit era games, where the introduction of 3 dimensions was a large boon to a lot of people. Although polygons. So
it was the first polygonal
angles.
fighter, yeah.
Or
not. It actually wasn't the first, but it was the first to popularize it, and it was the first to Super Mario 64 was not the first polygonal platformer, but it was the first good one, and it was the one that popularized it, and that's what Virtua Fighter was. Even if you weren't a fan of the Sega Saturn, that was a landmark for fighting games.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next year, to help drive adoption, the Sega Saturn decided to do what the Turbo Duo did, not to quite that extreme, but offered its 3 free games bundle, which came with Virtua Fighter 2, Daytona USA, and Virtua Cop. And this was probably either this or the Turbo Duo. The Turbo Duo probably more, but this is better known for being the real start of bundling. Because with the Sega Saturn, the 3 free games wasn't packed into the game. You bought it and they gave you the games with it. And that was kind of the start of bundling. Okay. I guess that's all we have to say about that.
Yep.
Well, it's one of those things where it's I never had too much experience with with that console. So
yeah, that's fine. I mean I did not own a Saturn. My friend Leon owned a Saturn, and I fell in love with several of its games. Nights into Dreams is one of my favorite games aesthetically of all time. I have a warm place in my heart for several of the games. I love Guardian Heroes. That is an excellent beat 'em up. I love there was a couple ones. There was a something Megamix. I forget what it was, but it was basically a kind of like Smash Bros ish, where you have all these people from different franchises come together. You have freaking Sonic in there fighting against the Daytona USA car as a fighter. It was just a completely tongue-in-cheek, ridiculous fighting game. I have a lot of fondness for the Sega Saturn. I wish it wasn't as forgotten as I feel like it is. But moving on from the Saturn, we get to the first major Nintendo console, or major console period, without a pack-in game, the Nintendo 64. The Nintendo 64 had no pack-in title, and much later on they introduced a couple bundles, and was basically the start of popularizing the bundle, with the best known one being the Donkey Kong 64 bundle that came later.
I remember that one.
Yeah. But the N64 came with nothing when you bought it, which is how I got it. But yes, they later they did a Donkey Kong 64 bundle. There were 4 or 5 different bundles that they did over time. But this is where I think we should kind of talk about how moving forward pack-in titles become rarer. And I have some theories, but do you guys have any thoughts on why the console industry had moved away from pack-ins.
It seems like the obvious one is to save money and make more money, because I mean, if you're including
one of the best titles in your console,
if you're including a title and not marking up your console, the overall price as a result, you know, that means you're eating the cost of the game, of that pack-in game. So it probably got into some marketer's head, or somebody in accounting or something, going, you know, if we stop doing pack-in games and actually force people to buy, you know, shell out a couple $100 for the console and then another $50 for the game, think of the possibilities.
Yeah. I feel cost is the main thing. I think it's also a thing too with, as we are moving more into the modern era, like the 32 and the 64-bit era, is the arrival and the prominence of third-party developers, and as their skill with the systems has increased, and like the cooperation between first party and third party has grown. The third party has not felt, the first party has not felt a need or a desire to work as hard in terms of developing for their system. Whereas,
the PlayStation, Xbox both leaned heavily on third parties to fill their consoles, at least early on.
Yeah,
we're seeing a somewhat of a return to first party development with them in the in recent years, but I think for them it was more we're pouring costs, we're pouring money into the development of the console, and we don't want to have to pour money into development of games as well.
Yeah, I think it's a thing where it's around this time when we start realizing that they can make just as much money, if not more money, via the providing a basis or a ground level of tech for companies to make games for, and having those games be. This is also you start seeing like the exclusivity starting to be a thing. So having titles start being exclusive to certain consoles.
Oh, I mean exclusivity notoriously went all the way back to the NES, where Nintendo prevented any third parties from working with anyone else.
Yeah, but it's at the time, I don't think anyone really thought about that. I think it's with the birth of the internet and more information flowing about, people are starting to realize, hey, like, A, there's more video gamers than we realized. B, we're not seeing these games showing up on other consoles. Why not?
I think a major factor as well with it is one of the most important things for a launch title to do, or a pack-in launch to do, is to drive adoption of the system. And I think they've gotten to the point, at least with Nintendo for the 64, where they felt that the name recognition alone was enough to drive the adoption. They didn't need any more. These people are already going to be buying the system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is part of it going forward as well, where if you know that people, just jumping ahead, if you know that people are going to be switching from your PS2 to your PS3, you don't need to drive the adoption if you already know the adoption rate is going to be high.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason for it. When before, like, you had to have a strong launch title for the NES, strong launch pack-in, because video games had died. Mm-hmm. You had to convince people to pick up video games again, and then after that, you had to have a strong launch pack-in, because Nintendo has 90% of the market share, and if you want to break into that, you need to give somebody a reason to buy your system rather than pick up an NES.
Yeah.
So yeah, Nintendo broke the mold there, with no pack-in for the N64, and we're going to see a lot of that going forward. Luckily not for this next one, though, because, actually, what do I mean next one? I have this in the wrong order. This came out before the N64. The PlayStation in 95 with the Ridge Racer bundle. Anybody have any experience with Ridge Racer?
I
just played it backwards.
I played R4, Ridge Racer Type 4.
Okay.
But that was not...
I played... Yeah, sorry.
That was not a pack-in title, but that is the only Ridge Racer game I'm familiar with.
I played the Ridge Racer pack-in quite a bit. I got that with my PlayStation. And I'm not a racing game fan, but it's there. And it came with the loading screen, I believe, has a version of Galaga on it. So you can play Galaga while you're waiting for the thing to load. And I thought that was genius, and I wish we saw it more. And the reason we didn't see it more was because they literally put a trademark on that, so nobody else could do it.
I think I did not get a bundle game with my PlayStation. I believe when I first got my PlayStation, it was also bought alongside Final Fantasy VII.
That's why I said the Ridge Racer was a bundle. They called it a bundle, but also the PlayStation was sold without Ridge Racer and was sold with a Ridge Racer bundle at the same time.
Yeah, I believe for me, it was a purchase of PlayStation only, and then I had saved up and bought Final Fantasy VII at the same time. And then
did yours come with the demo disc?
It did come with the demo disc, yes.
Yes. That was because that actually that sounds weird, but that actually counted as a pack-in.
I remember playing the ever-living crap out of the demo disc. And then it was like after like a week of playing the demo disc, I was like, okay, I actually need to buy a goddamn game for this now.
Yes.
Like the demo disc honestly had a lot of like pretty decent games on it. It was a puzzle game. It was a sports of some kind. I played the demo disc because one of my friends got the PlayStation without Ridge Racer and got the demo disc. I remember really enjoying it. I remember having a blast. I don't remember a goddamn game on the demo disc. I know I enjoyed it. I don't remember anything on it. Well, I'll Google this right now to figure out what games are on it. Because I'm like 90% sure Final Fantasy VII's bombing mission was on.
You might be able to because you owned it. I googled the PlayStation demo disc, and they had like dozens of demo discs, and I couldn't figure out which one we were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
But while you go down that rabbit hole, we will come back to that because I feel like this is going to take you a little while, and we will move on to the next one on my list. 4 years later, we have the Dreamcast, also with no initial pack-in. We can do a lot of talking about no initial pack-in. Isn't that your favorite game, Brian?
Oh, it's one of the greatest. And its sequel, No Initial Pack-In 2, 3.
Yeah, I brought this one up, though, because we all know the Dreamcast is both notorious for being a console that had some very excellent unrecognized games, but also for being the failure that destroyed Sega.
Yeah.
Do you think the lack of a pack-in was part of what hurt its adoption? Or do you think it's other factors? Because there was a lot going on.
I think it was a combination of factors. At this point, pack-in games were out of fashion, and I think this it was for the Dreamcast. I think it was more a combination of factors. Sega, there were some things that Sega shot themselves in the foot with.
Yeah, I mean, let's just wait. At the very least, the lack of a pack-in didn't help them.
It didn't help them. No, I agree there.
Dreamcast. I mean, we had a full podcast on the failure of the Dreamcast years ago, didn't we?
Yep.
Yeah. So we won't retread that ground too much, but the lack of a pack-in title certainly did not aid them. And a little while later, we also have the Dreamcast with no initial pack-in, but it has a very specific bundle I want to bring up. So the GameCube came out in 2001 with no pack-in, but in 2003 it came out with a bundle of the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition, which included Zelda 1, Zelda 2, Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, and I believe for the first time in America, the Master Quest version of Ocarina of Time also came with it.
Yeah, I think you're right with that.
And that was excellent. I got a free copy of it from it might have been GameStop at the time. I was gonna say EB, but I think it might have been GameStop. But I was there, and they had sold their copies of the GameCube and forgotten to give out one of the ones. And I was buying something else for the GameCube, and the guy was like, "Hey, you want a copy of the collector's edition?" And I'm like, "The Zelda Collector? Yes,
yes, give it to me now, yes."
But that right there is kind of like the Mario All Stars collector's one, and that is a very solid list of games right there.
Absolutely, and it's just interesting to see, starting with really the 5th generation and moving forward, the transition from the pack-in game to the occasional strategic marketing bundle.
Yeah, well, I mean, GameCube had at this point, all of the consoles we're going into had a lot of bundles. I only have one more thing I'm going to bring up after this, and then we'll talk about bundles and whatever. If you guys have ones I didn't mention you guys want to talk about, we'll go into that. But yes, this is where bundles became the thing. But we have one big exception: the one pack-in to rule them all, the one pack-in to bring them together, and that is Wii Sports for the Wii. The most successful pack-in of all time, and the 4th best-selling game of all time.
Yep, because, I was gonna say, and I think for Nintendo, that was a stroke of genius, because here you have what if my memory is correct, the first major console with motion control.
Yep.
So you needed to have something that casual and hardcore gamers alike, they needed something that would be your primer as to how to use the system. And what better way to do that than with a small collection of sports titles?
Yeah. Which I would argue that Nintendo dropped the ball with the Switch by not at least having 1-2 Switch be a pack-in title, because nobody was going to buy that otherwise.
Yeah, but as we saw with Breath of the Wild, I don't think Nintendo really needed a pack-in game for the Switch.
I know, but I feel like, let's put it this way, I feel like 1-2 Switch was if you weren't going to develop it as a pack-in, then why develop it at all?
I mean, fair. I totally get that logic. I'm just saying that with how, especially in the first year of the Switch's, within the first year of the Switch's release, how that system just basically printed money.
Well, now I'm going to talk out farther than just release, but when you look at Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8, the redone,
yep,
and Mario Odyssey, it is hard to find a Switch owner that doesn't own at least one, if not all 3 of those games.
Yep. But back to the...
I have all 3 of them. Like, I don't even like racing games that much, and I have Mario Kart 8. Like...
Yeah. I did look it up. I could not find the exact... I could not find the exact list. I remember some of the titles, though, as I was looking at the thing. My demo disc had Einhander, Parappa the Rapper...
Did it have the one with the skeleton dude? Medieval?
I don't think so.
I thought that was one of them, but I could absolutely be wrong.
The ones I was able to not confirm, but be 90% sure of it, and that my demo just had. It had Einhander, Parappa the Rapper, Intelligent Cube, Armored Core, It had either Wipeout or Washout. It was or some sort of like jet ski sort of looking thing.
Yep.
There's a fighting game for Star Wars that was
Yes, there was.
It's a fucking terrible game, mind you.
Yes, it was.
But it was on that demo disc, and I had the bombing run of Final Fantasy 7.
So you got the
That
demo.
is a solid list right there.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, and it was definitely the disc I played. Maybe I'm thinking, maybe the Medieval demo came with a different game. I remember the Medieval demo, but I remember all the rest of those. I remember loving that Armored Core demo.
And then
And Parappa the Rappa was just such a wonderful title aesthetically.
yeah, simple for modern day games, but
Simple isn't bad.
yeah, I was gonna say it's not bad.
Yeah, that's one thing I need to point out several times. I think I pointed out in the graphics and aesthetics episode where simple is not bad.
Yeah.
Simple is simple, and simple can be a good or a bad thing depending on how you use it.
It's just a thing too where I feel like Sony realizing that they need to make a big splash on immediately. I feel like the demo discs of the time were meant to be here's a taste of all the wide variety of titles that we're gonna have available either at launch or almost within a month of the console being out.
And PlayStation made demo discs a major thing for them because like their PlayStation magazine came with a demo disc every month showcasing games that were coming up.
Yeah.
That's why when I looked up, there were literally dozens of demo discs, and then games you bought came with their own demo discs, and like the whole demo discs in general, but specifically the PlayStation and Sony's obsession with demo discs. And I don't mean obsession in a bad way, but that could almost be its own title, just diving into that world of PlayStation demo discs.
Yeah.
But while you were looking that up, we are up onto Wii. We are up to Wii Sports.
Yes, the bundle with the Wii and what I lost probably $50 worth of batteries to.
Yep, the fourth best-selling game of all time, Wii Sports.
I'm assuming 1 and 2, so somewhere of the 3 above it are Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario World.
Well, let's put it this way. I've given my piece. If you guys want to talk a little bit about your experiences with Wii Sports and the Wii, I will pull up my list of the best-selling games that I was using.
So I bought the Wii initially for Metroid Prime 3 Corruption because I was in my youth as a college kid at the time, I had bought the Wii and was like, I'm a big fan of Metroid. I really enjoyed Metroid Primes 1 and 2. I'd want to play Metroid Prime 3 as soon as possible, and if it's some sort of motion control-y thing, I can make do with trying to use it with my right hand. And then also me is like, fuck that, I'm just gonna use my left hand. Because that's my left hand's my dominant hand. And and it came with Wii Sports. And then I'm like, okay, this is a nice little bundle game. And I started playing, I'm like, oh, this would be really good with a party game. And I'm like, wait, I have college friends and friends and roommates, then they would enjoy playing this too. Oh, we're gonna get real competitive, aren't we? And it became a thing where almost every day, I mean almost every day after classes, I would walk across campus with the Wii bundled up in my backpack for the first 4 or 5 months, and then we would start doing Wii Sports with bowling mainly was the main one I think we did the most of.
So I have returned. Here are the top 5 best-selling games off the list that I'm using. And I'm actually, this is actually a different list than the original one that I had. Wii Sports is actually number 3, not number 4.
Okay.
The original Super Mario Bros., at selling 48 million copies is number 5.
Mhm.
PlayerUnknown's Battleground is number 4 at 60 million.
Which is, I get. It's just like that's a being the successor doesn't necessarily mean the innovator. But go ahead.
Okay. Wii Sports at 82 million copies is number 3. Number 2 at a big jump up is 120 million with Grand Theft Auto 5.
Not surprised.
And then number 1 at 180 million copies, Minecraft.
No, not surprised. I'm not surprised.
Over double Wii Sports.
I'm not surprised here. All right.
Yeah, and like I can't be surprised because Minecraft in the early 2010s was like the first the first modern era like WoW.
I'll say
WoW.
I'll give a quick shout out to the other ones in the top 10. The first generation of Pokemon titles, Red, Green, Blue, and Yellow. Wii Fit and Wii Fit Plus. Mario Kart for the Wii. Tetris. And Wii Sports Resort. All of them over 33 million.
Cool.
That's good.
All right, veering back to the topic here.
Yeah. Veering back to the topic at hand. What are you talking about? Brian, everyone is currently quarantined. They want as much entertainment from us as we can give them. We can veer as much as we want.
Yeah, unless they got sick of us in the last episode.
We have come down with DLC podcast fever.
No, that hype's gonna be the next somewhere probably the next 2 episodes when we start talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Probably.
I'm not joking, Brian. You can cut this out of the recording. There's a non-zero chance we spent 7 hours talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Well, that's
There's a non-zero chance.
Brian, I will tell you right now, I've not completed the game yet, so maybe my opinion will change. But as of right now, I vastly prefer the remake to the original.
And when I eventually get there, I will eventually find out whether I agree with you or not. But
peer pressure.
Yeah. Well,
so
I'm not buying a PS4 for one
game.
game.
Get back on topic. I just like.
I'd lend you mine if you weren't so far away. Ron?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just like, I was trying to get us back on topic, and then I realized I don't even remember where we were.
It's fine.
We're still on Wii Sports and then pretty much for the next 3 months, I would bring my Wii to my friends, and we would all across campus, and then we would start playing for 3 or 4 hours because who gets to do homework in college? And it was only around January of the next year when that roommate on the other campus side got their Wii, and then it turned for me bringing the Wii and the Joy-Cons, or the frick they're called, to just bring in the Wiimotes. Yep. And once again, this being probably the first true pack-in game for any console in years, and it really helped to get that support base, because you're dealing with a console that is dealing with motion control as its main its main operation.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong too, wasn't one of the big driving forces behind the Wii sales was, besides being super fucking cheap compared to the other consoles at the time, it was also being used in physical therapy?
Oh yeah, this system and this game appealed to such a wide base. It and probably still used even today in like physical therapy applications and things like that. I mean, this sort of had the same, I guess, success as Tetris. You could argue Tetris for the original Game Boy, and just in how many people adopted it, both it and the console.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we start drifting back, back away from pack-ins again. But it was nice to see, like, some childhood.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was the end of my list of pack-in games I wanted to specifically talk about. If you guys have any ones you guys wanted to talk about that we didn't bring up and talk about already, please do, and after that we can talk about the importance of pack-in titles in general, and how this has changed the industry with them slowly making them go away.
I just like. I feel like a part of it. I think the reason why we don't see it anymore is just because it's a cost thing that they don't want to. It's a loss of money for them.
Well, here's the thing. I would argue with that. Because they do bundles all the frickin' time,
yeah.
And that's literally the same thing, except pack-ins come initially. I think it's more they want to let a game prove itself before they bundle it and give it a big push like that.
Yeah. That's the other thing is I feel like without being as certain as you are in with titles nowadays, especially that you don't have an idea of how strong a particular game is going to be in terms of gameplay mechanics and what have you. That they want to see that this game be successful in terms of sales before they start bundling it to build up more like and hype around their console and the push console sales, because at the end of the day that they're trying to make sales as a company to offset the cost of their consoles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, by doing multiple smaller bundles of games that have proven themselves, you can give a wider variety, because outside of, like, let's take a look. Outside of, let's say, Super Mario Bros., Tetris. Outside of Super Mario Bros. And Tetris and Wii Sports, most pack-in games appeal to not as broad an audience. And even arguably, you could see Super Mario Bros. If it was released if it was released later, would also count on that. But the fact Super Mario Bros. Helped bring video games back, that had a broad enough appeal. But for the most part, if you only have one pack-in and it doesn't appeal to your entire audience, that's going to put people off who might have been interested in your console regularly.
If your first foray into the genre or to your console is the pack-in game, and said pack-in game is not lights out, they're not going to feel a desire to buy more into your console.
Yeah, exactly.
So would you then argue? Would you then say that since the Wii was the last console with the last true pack-in game, and that now was what, 2007? 13 years ago?
2005?
2006.
2006, okay. So we were hovering in the area. So
2006.
14 years ago at this point, could you make the argument then that pack-in games have outlived their usefulness? Given the fact that it was so long between the Wii and Wii Sports and the previous one, now we've gone another 14 years. Do you think that they've outlived their usefulness at this point?
I think their usefulness has evolved. I would argue two consoles really needed, or really would have benefited from having this that didn't, and that would be the Wii U and the Switch. And here's my argument here, why it was so successful with the Wii. I don't think a regular console that is just an iterative improvement needs to have a pack-in.
Mm-hmm.
A pack-in is always going to be an okay idea, but I'm not going to say that they've screwed everything over by switching to bundle. But I feel like anytime your console is doing something really unique, you really want to have a pack-in that showcases that uniqueness and expresses it to the player so that they don't have to spend their money on something they may not have bought into yet. It helps people buy in. That was part of what Wii Sports with motion controls did. And I feel like if the Wii U had had a similar thing with its touchpad, or the Switch with all of the things the Switch does, that would have been good. The Switch obviously didn't need it. It had two of the most anticipated games of all time already coming that drove adoption, but I still feel like it could have benefited from having that thing that showcases everything that the system can do.
Fair.
I feel that also with the Wii, specifically in Wii Sports, at that point in time, motion controls were a gimmick at best and were not a thing in like 95% of games, period.
Mm-hmm.
So to push the sales of their game, to prove that this is an actual solid concept and not just a gimmick, they need to put in a game like Wii Sports to show the wide range of responsiveness and motion that the game could capture.
Yeah.
And to show that though this isn't just a gimmick, and it is actual viable technology, and it is functional, if not accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, not accurate until we got the Wii Motion Plus, and even then, it's arguable.
Yeah,
it's better.
It's better. It's not as accurate as you wanted, but keep in mind, motion controls are still a thing that we're still having issues with even today. So it's only really now that you're starting to see motion control or motion tracking starting to be A, feasible, and B, reasonable in cost.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think having something that showcased the Wii U and the Switch's unique abilities, that was a pack-in would have benefited Nintendo a lot. But I don't see the lack of pack-ins being a flaw in modern systems. I mean, I actually pulled this up. Here's a very short list of PS4 bundles they have right now, or that they've had. Red Dead Redemption 2, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Call of Duty World War 2. Lots of 2s in here. Uncharted 4. There we go. We can count. We just missed 1 and 3 now.
We're playing with the divisions right now.
Yeah. Destiny 2. The Marvel's Spider-Man bundle. And the NBA 2K. Like, they can do a bunch of different bundles at different retailers, do short runs of them to drive adoption. Like, if you know, like, I exclusively bought a PS4 to get Persona 5. I didn't see a bundle, but if there was a bundle of Persona 5, I would absolutely have bought it because that's why I'm getting it. So if you go, we have a game that's going to drive adoption. Yeah, make a bundle with that game, and then the people who are buying it for that game are just going to buy that bundle. Like, it does make sense. I just feel like consoles that are trying to do something unique, aka every Nintendo console, pretty much, other than the GameCube, really benefits from having a pack-in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from here, do you guys have anything else you'd like to say, or should we wind this down?
I think we wind it down. I don't see a reason why not to.
Okay. As we wind down this episode, I'd like to remind everyone that if any of you out there in this wide world of the internet have anything you'd like to tell us about this or any other episode of Downloadable Content, you can contact us on Twitter or Facebook. I'd also like to remind everyone that every single episode of Downloadable Content can be found on the website dlcpodcast.com. Episodes can be found on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and wherever else you get your podcasts. All that remains is for me to thank my guests, Brian and Ron, for joining me on this episode. Thank you guys very much, and have a good one, everybody.